Welcome. This is December the 29th, 2025. My guest, it's a real honor to host Grant Cameron. He's probably Canada's best known ufologist. And Grant's offered to give me some feedback by ET hypothesis and sources. So welcome, Grant. It's great to have you.
Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate your invite, and let's try to bring some new information to people.
Yeah. So I'll just read a section of my hypothesis. It's 18 sections long. We could just do part of it. I
Yeah,
can just read part one and then you can comment
yeah,
or stop me at any time and
yeah.
you can
No, go
comment,
ahead.
you know. Part one is Introduction, a Galactic Vision for Humanity. In my view, the UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon reflects a benevolent agenda by non-human intelligences, NHIs, to guide humanity beyond Homo sapiens towards an advanced, spiritually awakened species. So this hypothesis integrates over a century of contact accounts, whistleblower testimony, spiritual insight, and research into a coherent picture of extraterrestrial stewardship. So I operate within a school of thought in the UFO community, but also connect dots across other disciplines to arrive at an evidence-based hypothesis about the highest truths we can glean from contact phenomenon. I'm deeply committed to question openly, revising when necessary, and presenting evidence to support or refute claims within the UFO and contact literature. So that's part one. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would agree with you that we have a non um, uh, danger situation, that they are here to teach us. I would absolutely agree that they're here to move us along, and that's their agenda. Otherwise, nothing else makes sense. Like if you take a look at, why do they fly around with lights on? They want you to see them. They're trying to get our attention. And if they wanted to eat us for lunch, they could have done that a long time ago, rather than waiting for us to get some sort of technology that might interfere with them. So I would agree. I think where I move different than other people on the whole thing is this idea where Jim Semivan says there does not appear to be any there out there there. You're, no, there's does not appear to be any there. And that gets into your Buddhist philosophy, this sort of idea of the Hindu Maya, where basically it's all one thing, it's all illusion. You can move around in time and space, and there's this idea of space and time may be an illusion. That's where I think I sort of, and I before I was with everybody else, that it appears that there's all this stuff out there, and but now once I hear all this other stuff coming from contactees and channelers and stuff like that, and from quantum physics, where they basically say, Donald Hoffman will say the concept of time and space is dead. And I think that's one of these indigestible things that people are going to have a very hard time absorbing. The fact that the Eastern traditions of 5,000 years ago actually had it down to a science a long time ago, and they knew it before us. And just because they couldn't build cell phones doesn't mean they're not smart.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, sure. I can carry on with
Yeah.
section two. Yeah, section two is the Mantid architects and the gray emissaries. At the highest level, the galactic picture begins with the Mantid beings, ancient insectoid intelligences, resembling Earth's praying mantis but standing 7 to 8 feet tall. With lifespans that may extend for billions of years, these beings are regarded as master geneticists and architects of life across the galaxy. The Greys, known for their abduction and hybridization work, are subordinate to the Mantids and carry out their directives as planetary stewards and evolutionary agents. Together, they belong to a larger interplanetary federation of species, an alliance committed to developing life, managing planetary ecosystems, and fostering spiritual evolution. So they're like gardeners. This federation goes by different names, such as the Galactic Council, but I refer to simply as a federation of planets. The Mantids appear to set the long-term agenda, while the Greys carry it out, and they govern this planet, and as such must be acknowledged as its legitimate authorities. And although countless species exist across the galaxy, one primary federation operates in this realm. No rogue species can simply land openly and disrupt the agreement, which maintains a structured approach to contact. So while I recognize that negative species, such as some reptilians, exist and have acted through certain human institutions, this too operates within a larger karmic framework. The law of karma applies universally, explaining why some interventions occur and others do not. So in this sense, we must accept the responsibility for eclectic karmic circumstances. Okay, that's part 2.
Okay, well, I would say that there's no doubt that people are having these experiences with grays, reptilians, mantids, but I would remind people, because I've been at it for so long, that it's not a simple thing. Everybody wants to throw it like this is what UFOs is about. And as I pointed out, I just put on my Facebook and my Twitter a review of 2 books. We helped Nancy Tremaine write 2 books, and she is the first abductee, that known abductee. This is July of 1961, 2 months before Betty and Barney Hill. And people don't realize that if there's I'm gonna actually was thinking of, hang on, let me write it down here, just to make sure I do this today. I wanted to look at, there's an actual catalog, and a guy wrote a number of books on this thing with humanoid reports. And I asked him, I said, okay, how many, he had 20,000 humanoid reports. And I said, oh, how many different types of species? And he said, well, he'd never counted, but he said there's got to be at least 1,000 species, which indicates a complexity, that something else is going on. So it's not just grays, reptilians, and mantids. And even if it is that this started, the reptilians, I asked the one guy who does all the drawings of different aliens for people, experiencers, I asked him, when did the reptilians, your first encounter with reptilians, come up? And he said 1980. And the mantids, I'm not sure. You'd have to go to AI and ask through AI, when was the first report of a mantid? And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be before 1961. So if you look at these catalogs of alien encounters before 1961, what you'll see is little tiny dwarfs, little people that looked like us, but they were a lot smaller. You'll see hairy creatures, and most importantly, you'll see a lot of reports in the 40s and 50s of aliens with bubble helmets. Almost Travis Walton actually had a one with a bubble helmet, and that really doesn't make any sense, because that's almost like a takeoff from science fiction from the 1940s and 50s of space travel, that we'd have these bubble helmets on, and suddenly you see the aliens with the bubble helmets on. And that's this idea that people talk about, whether it's Brandon Fugel or whether it's well, Brandon Fugel is the main one that I think that puts it out, is this idea of reflective quality, that it's like looking at a mirror, that when you look at this experience, it reflects back what your belief system is. And Barbara Streisand's stepson actually told me that. That was Chris Peters. His father was John Peters, who ran Columbia Pictures. But he said that the beings told him that when we come into your world, we go into your brain and we see what's there. And it is with that we build a message. We have no other choice. We can't put in stuff that isn't there. And so it's reflective of our interpretations. So you'll see people like John Mack pointing out the fact that people who are in fear may see grays, people with very high energy levels, and it has always to do with sexual. If you look at the reptilian, it always has this sexual element to it. And then you get the mantids, which would be a third part, an overlay of it. So it may actually be like when you and I come in, because you're in this idea of the reincarnation, the Eastern idea that we cycle in and out. All the world's a stage, all the men and women are but actors. So you put on your Brian suit, I put on my Grant suit, and we play this little role, and we're not really it. And so I would think that what you may be getting there is that a bunch of entities, because everybody, when you break it down, everybody is a an etheric being. They don't have any form. There's no physical form. They're in this sort of an energy form, and that a bunch of entities may have gotten together and said, okay, let's play a little role. We're gonna have these. We're gonna be some grays, and we're gonna have some reptilians, and they sort of made this whole thing up and came in and did all this kind of stuff. But in the end, it's to teach us a lesson. And so you'll get stuff like where people will say the mantids are no, the reptilians are bad. And I'm 100% on the sort of the Eastern idea that there is no good and bad. There's just experience. So we interpret this as bad because it's not going our way. Almost like we say that other races are bad. when in fact we're the ones that dropped the atomic bomb, and we always see reflective of us being the good guys, and we always want to play the victim role because that's what happens in life is we want to have a victim, so we have to have bad guys who are oppressing us and they're messing around with us and stuff like that because that goes over well. So I think in the end, the phenomenon is going on. There is this gray reptilian mantid thing, but I think it's a lot of it is a stage play. And the other thing that I point out to people, everybody thinks the grays are all the same thing. So I even got you were with me yesterday. We were with Terry Tabando, and he has an encounter in 53 with grays, but they have blue eyes, bright blue eyes. And I did a comparison where I actually gathered them together, and you can do this. You can go through the thing, not people who report, but people actually like Terry who drew his own being, or where the being was drawn and the person said, yes, that was the being I saw. That's exactly what I saw. And what you'll find is that all the grays look different. They're completely different. Some have ridges. Some have like Terry's with blue eyes. Some have round eyes. Some have almond-shaped eyes, bigger eyes, and this sort of thing. And what you see is that they don't look to anything the same. And that is this idea that maybe it is like human beings where we're all different, or it may be that it's reflective, that we are seeing what a different version, and when we put it out, it has part of our personality in the type of being that we're seeing. Because as I point out, before 1961, if you had an encounter with a being, it would not be a gray, a reptilian, or a mantid. And then finally, I would always point out to people when they want to throw all the grays, mantids, reptilians into one thing, is I say you go to Mission Rama, which is a very powerful group that started 1974. It's a Latino group, very religious, all Roman Catholics, and they do this protocol where they pray and they om and they meditate and stuff, and they try to raise their vibration, and they are able to open these what they call zendras, which are like portals where the beings come into the zendra, and 7 people go into the zendra, and they'll interact with this being or whatever. And I say to people, they've been around since 1974, and there's 25,000 of them, and they have all sorts of encounters. I wrote 2 books on the subject of the Mission Rama, and you will not see a gray, a reptilian, or a mantid. What you're going to see is reflective of these people. They're very religious, they're Roman Catholic, and what you will see is their beings look like they jumped right out of the Bible. They have long hair, they're wearing robes, and a completely different sort of phenomena. So whatever it is, I think all these phenomena, all these beings that we're having encounters with, are going to be trying to teach us something, and that we probably agreed to this in our higher self before we came in here. And you'll see the crossover. I think you already mentioned it, the crossover to channeling and stuff like that, where channelers will talk. If you'll talk to somebody and you'll know if somebody's trance channeling, if they say they're not trance channeling, that's the ego talking. They'll say we, as if it's a collective. So you get the collective in the UFO, but you also get the collective when people are channeling. You're going to get a collective. Even Bashar is a collective. He talks as Bashar, but it's a collective of beings. And you'll see this over and over again, that it's always a we. And once you hit the we, then you know you're talking to the higher self, that because everything on that side is all connected. It's all one thing. And there is no sort of ego, I. That's a physical human thing of the left brain.
Okay. Yeah, with the grays, I think they're master geneticists, and they can make various models of gray to suit whatever purposes they want. So they can make all kinds of different type of grays because
Well,
I think they're
the problem I
geneticists.
have with that is that if the grays they're playing with our genes, and I'm actually doing, I'll have a podcast that it'll be an AI podcast, which some people won't like, but it's on. If you read up Michael Levine, Michael Levine is a guy who's working on tadpoles and stuff like that, where he's able to make tadpoles with 2 heads, and he's actually able to make what do you call them, xenobods, which are he made them. There is no such thing as a xenobot. He made them, and he talks about this the power of these things, and he says it's not happening at a DNA level. It's happening at a bioelectric level. So I'm just
Oh,
gathering this material. And so the idea is that and there's another woman who did research on fields around people, like aura fields, and she found this discovery that she could tell half a second before before the brain registered it, that something was going to happen, that this was picking up, almost like it happens in the field, then it happens in the brain, then the finger moves or whatever the thing is. And she had the same idea that there's a field around us. So the issue I have with this whole genetic thing is that if you take a look at Greys, and Greys very particularly, will do what I say. They'll come into your room and they'll wake you up. Like so, and I always look at these weird things, like why is this happening? Like why would a Gray come into Brian's room and go, Brian, wake up, hey, wake up, and then hey, look at me, I'm a ugly looking alien, and of course you freak out, and what happens there is you dissociate, and in all the types of things where you've got a higher element where somebody is able to channel or a mediumship or something like that, very often you'll find this dissociation thing, that they had childhood abuse issues, that they had an accident, they had a near-death experience, and they're able to dissociate. They're able to move into their sort of higher consciousness or higher self, whatever you want to call it. And so that's where you take a look at Greys. And if they're just doing genetics, then it's physical. So then how do Greys take you through the wall? That would indicate that they're pulling your astral body and they're taking your astral body to the ship, and that's how you can go through the wall. And so is it genetics, or is it some sort of electric field, a geomagnetic field that they know how to manipulate in order to do it? And that's why I say this whole thing about them waking you up, it seems to me very clearly that they want to scare the living daylights out of you, because then you dissociate. That's what, and then they say, okay, Brian's ready to go. He's freaked out. He's dissociated. Now we've got him. And they take your astral body. They got to separate your astral body from your physical body, and that's how they do it, by this sort of a terror thing that makes you freeze. And then next thing you're floating through the wall, which would indicate that it's not the physical thing that we think it is. Now, there may be physical things that are happening on the ship, and people will describe, marks on their body, but you can do that through hypnosis. You can make somebody's arm, pretend you were burning them with a cigarette, and the stuff will appear on their arm, even though you really didn't do anything. So you have that ability. And then I always bring out this thing about the marks on people's arms. Like, you came 1,000 light years to put a triangle on Brian's arm. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Come on.
But what about physical bodies? People report their physical bodies being taken up in the craft, like right through the window and up on the craft.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the thing. You may have physical and you may have
or astral, both ways.
astral body, but the thing is, people will report going up onto the ship. But the thing is, why do they allow you to remember going through the wall? And I think it's almost like they're giving you indirect hints as to what's going on. So there may be situations where people disappear. But then you get this in other aspects as well. So I don't know if you've ever studied Akiana Kramark. Akiana Kramark is a double prodigy. She wrote 3 books or 2 books on poetry at 7 years old. She's the one that painted Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane at 8 years old. This painting was apparently worth $5 million. It's unbelievable. It's like a photograph. And she's able to do this unbelievable painting since she was about 5 years old. They report that she disappeared. When she was 5 years old, she disappeared, and they actually had police, they had tracking dogs, they had people looking for her, and she reappears in the middle of the hallway in front of people. And they asked her where she had gone, and she said she had been missing for, I think, for 4 hours. And she said, "Where did you go?" And she said, "I was taken." Sometimes she said it was Jesus. Sometimes she said it was God. Sometimes she says it was an orb. But she was taken and shown 1,000 faces in the universe, and she was told what to paint. So she's got a site called Akiana Kramark, and you can actually watch. She has little videos where you actually can watch her do a painting, where she does this painting, and she's one of the best painters in the world, and it's like realism painting. It's absolutely like a photograph. And I think she's only now maybe 27 years old. She's been doing this for all these years. And again, so I say to people, okay, so what, did Jesus abduct her? I mean, did God abduct her? And it's the same process, that she remembers going somewhere and she disappeared. So her physical body was gone, but she was being taken through the universe. So are they able to move a body through the universe? or is there some sort of other aspect of because we fall into this whole thing that everything is material and physical, and that's why we can't solve the UFO problem because it's going to be much more Eastern Buddhist type aspect, and that's when Jim Semivan says this is indigestible. Because when you start dropping this stuff on people, you remember the guy that was there yesterday, and he was talking about we need physical evidence, we need stuff to
Yeah,
measure,
yeah. So meet
and it
and
was
greet.
that sort of thing where most people are going to say that this is crazy stuff. Don't talk to me about this consciousness stuff, and I'm turning this off, and it's absolutely crazy stuff. But with the work being done by Michael Levine and this woman that's doing the field around the body, where they're able to show that it's a field that's actually giving the instruction to the cell. Because people don't realize that, like a cell, if we talk AI, we can talk AI. People will talk about AI being conscious, and it can never be conscious because it doesn't have any. It has just a switch. And the guy that invented the microprocessor pointed that out. He said a computer is just a switch. I mean, they're a bunch of switches, a bunch of transistors. They're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. They don't know they're a switch. They have no clue they're a switch. They don't even know if they're on and off. They have no clue. They're just a switch. But if you take a cell in the human body, I looked it up yesterday and I said, how many processes are going on in a human cell per second? And they said quadrillions of operations. That's how complex the cells are. And what you realize is that the cell, this oneness complex, this oneness message that you'll find in Eastern traditions, and the UFO beings teach this thing. It's 54% of people who had encounters with non-human intelligence said they were talked about oneness and love. And this comes to this concept that oneness is the key. And this Levine is working on this whole thing about cancer cells, that what he's saying is happening with cancer cells is that they break off the oneness. So there's this connection that connects all the cells together because all the cells are working together to make a human body. They're not doing their own little thing. They're all doing their little job. And the human bodies are supposed to be all one in the human Gaia that are supposed to be doing something, but we've broken apart like cancer. And what he says is what's happening in a cancer cell is the breakage, there's a breakage between the cells that the one cell breaks off and it thinks it's an individual cell. So it goes back to being just a single cell and it says everything else is just food. Everything else is just an environment around me and I'm an individual and it has no longer a link. And they're able now to actually send the link back to the cancer cell to rejoin the rest of the cells. And once it does that, the cancer's gone. And cancer is just this breakage of the oneness principle in that a cell will break off. I used to describe it before I learned this thing was it's like ego. The cell gets an ego and it breaks off and it decides almost like we have this situation in the world now. Don't tell me what to do. I'll do whatever I want. You can't tell me what to do. I'm an individual and this sort of stuff. And what you've got is you've got 8 billion people all running around claiming they're individuals and everybody's doing their own thing. And it's almost like a football game or like a soccer game. If everybody's doing their own thing and you don't have a plan and everybody's working together to move the ball down the field or whatever it is, the whole thing falls apart. The team that wins is not necessarily the team with the best players. It's the team where everybody works together to do what they're supposed to do and everybody's doing their job. But if you go in the football huddle and somebody says, "You want me to block? Are you kidding? I'm not going to block. I could get injured. I'm going to run for a pass. Don't tell me what to do." And of course, if he doesn't block, of course, the quarterback gets killed because there's nobody blocking. And that's this concept that the intelligence, whatever this intelligence is teaching us this oneness principle, which you go back to the Eastern traditions. And I say the way the Eastern traditions dissociated, the aliens are using this thing where they wake you up and they scare you or whatever. But in Eastern traditions, the way they dissociated was to sit in a cave for 3 years and they dissociate. And that's when they go into the field and they bring down this truth from the field and bring it back into the physical world and put it out. And then 5,000 years later, we suddenly decide, hey, these guys knew something. How did they know this? And I say it's because they did this meditation thing, which you can do now, but they had a great advantage because these guys were doing this for 2 to 3 years inside a cave. And if you sit in a cave for 2, 3 years, you even have these things that go on now where these dark room things where you can actually go into these situations where they'll have like 7 or 8 people in a house where everything's blocked off and it's completely dark and your food is brought in, and you have no sight. And after about 3 or 4 days, you start to see beings. You start to hallucinate, not hallucinate. You start to dissociate, and you start to see dead people and all this kind of stuff. And people do these dark room things now. It's almost like a psychedelic where they'll do this, and that's the whole thing. Same with psychedelics. What it does, it kills the ego. It shuts down the default mode network, which is the ego, which is the left side of the brain. And when you shut that ego side down, the cancer cell that thinks it knows what it's doing, once you shut the ego down to make it go and meditate or go and count things or find some way like hypnosis or meditation, count your breaths. And after a while, the left brain, of course, is the one that you're talking to. So the left brain counts breaths for about 30 seconds, and then you have to remind it because it decides it's not going to do that anymore. It's going to start thinking about something else, and you keep reminding it and you keep reminding it. And after a while, the left brain says, I can't take this, I'm out of here. And it just shuts down. And that's when it opens up and the person goes under hypnosis. But as long as the ego is fighting it, you can't be hypnotized because the ego is still running the show, and it says, this is nonsense, this is garbage. And that's where the skeptic comes from in the UFO field. I absolutely maintain that the skeptic is the left brain, they call it left brain interpreter, which I don't know if I've talked about to your group, but left brain interpreter is you have two pieces of information in the physical world, one piece of information, and then something new comes up like a UFO or something. So now there's a hole. There's something that doesn't make sense. Like how do you get between this and that? And then what the left brain interpreter does is it immediately makes something up to make the situation understandable and make it normal again. So it says, oh, it's a weather balloon. And everybody goes, oh, okay, it's a weather balloon. And then go back to your life. And it'll make this stuff up, and it's always wrong. So the left brain interpreter, that's the skeptic. So you'll get a skeptic who will say, no, this is garbage. And what you'll find is they just made it up. They don't read anything. They didn't learn anything. It pops in their head. That's the left brain interpreter is putting the balloon, the mogul balloon, or whatever the thing is in your head. And then the same thing happened when they researched this left brain interpreter, is they found they would actually send a signal to the right brain, left brain. Then they would tell the left brain, they say, why did you walk around? And they had no idea because they blocked it, and only the female side of the brain saw it. So the female brain can't talk, but it knows why it got up and walked around. But the left brain, of course, doesn't know. I mean, has no idea because it didn't see the signal, and it'll make up something. It'll say, oh, my legs were hurting or whatever. And then you say, no, that's not why you got up and walked around. You got up and walked around because we sent a signal to the other side of the brain, and it got up and walked around. And the left brain, this ego left brain thing, will fight it. It'll say, nope, nope, nope. And they say it'll never back down. That's the absolute description of a skeptic. You just make another explanation, and he will never accept the fact that he was wrong. And that's coming out of the left brain. So that's where skepticism comes from. And people say you have to have skepticism. And I say, no, you don't have to have skepticism. You got to have proper skepticism. Because people say, extraordinary ideas require extraordinary evidence. But that's not, if you go back to Descartes, who came up with it, and people don't realize Descartes got the scientific method and the idea of skepticism in 3 dreams that he got 3 nights in a row. He got 3 dreams. It came out of a dream. And the skepticism has got nothing to do with new ideas. He didn't say, be skeptical of new ideas. He said, be skeptical of the stuff you've learned. At one point, he said, I may have to throw out everything I've ever learned. And that's the problem we've got, is we believe that everything we learned is true. And as Mark Twain says, it's not the things you don't know that get you in trouble. It's the things you know that just ain't so. And that's the problem that we have, is that we assume all this stuff is right, and we won't back down on it. And the new ideas are coming in, and that's why Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time. The only way it's going to stop, you're never going to convince the skeptic. The only way it'll stop was he dies, and the young generation that's following us, they know about UFOs. They're not really threatened by it, and so they just accept it, and that's how science advances.
Yeah, I wanted to comment. You mentioned like 8 billion people with 8 billion intentions. I think the Greys, they're a telepathic community, so they're more of a communal mind,
Yeah.
So, and I think they want humanity to work in that way. They want to evolve humanity, so we have more of a telepathic society, more quantum dimensional consciousness, like in tune with higher
Yep.
dimensions and more of a spiritual orientation to life. So I think they, over generations or centuries, they want to evolve us that way. That's part of my
Yeah, that's
hypothesis.
this Hive thing. But if you go into the UFO community, people hate this. This is communism, man. This is
I
communism.
know.
We're not going to have the Hive mentality. And this a Hive mentality that keeps the thing together because you can take like whether it's bees or ants or something. If you destroy the colony, they'll immediately start building it. Now they never learned how to build it, but they will put it back together. They will sacrifice themselves for each other to protect the colony and stuff like that. And that's where you get this idea of this the thing that if we all work together, like, it's the idea. If you get 8 billion people, if 8 billion people all get on Twitter, and this is what's happening, 8 people get on Twitter and they all whine and complain about 5 different things. That's going to create a very negative attitude. But if you take 8 billion people who all do something very simple, like when you go out, say hello to the people around you, say thank you to people when you're in the grocery store, and stuff like that. You do five. So you take 8 billion people who are doing 5 positive things every day. That's 40 billion things that are being done positive every day. And then you can multiply that by times of months and stuff like that. And that's what it is. We don't realize that our negative attitudes, our separation attitudes spread. And I say that's what happened in the United States of America, that in 2015 was a different country. Now it's more of a separation country where it's like, I'm going to do what I want and get rid of the government and all this kind of stuff. And you have this sort of a thing where everybody's got their own little country. Or in Canada, now we're getting the separation. Quebec wants to separate, Alberta wants to separate, and it's like the separation. And the more we separate, the more we make our other people our enemy, the bigger problem we got. So I watch channelers, and one of the channelers I really like is Paul Selleck. And the way Paul Selleck says it is this, and I'll paraphrase what, and he's repeated this numerous times from his guides. So again, he's using a collective, almost like the Hive, like they're talking as a collective. And he said, whatever and whoever you take and separate from the divine and put into darkness that same thing or person through co-resonance, because you will resonate with that. Through co-resonance, that same thing or person will drag you into the darkness with it. What you damn, damns you back. What you bless, blesses you in return. And here's where it comes to this whole Christian idea where Christians don't act like Christians anymore. He says that finally, he says, to say, I am divine and you are not is nothing more than the shadow pretending to be the light. And this is the whole thing. It's this oneness principle. If we all realize that you are me in a different costume, they were all the same thing, and you agreed to play Brian, and I played Grant, and everybody's playing a different role, and we got these things to do, and we're all one thing. When we go back out of our bodies, we join up with the one, that we're all one. Then you start to realize that for me to go after you is to go after myself. And it doesn't make any sense. That's where the Hive mentality comes from. When everybody's thinking as one thing, when you, as the big metaphysical message is, um, remember who you actually are. You are not the body. You are not the puppet on the stage. You are the etheric being that's outside, that's connected to all the other things, and we're all one when we separate from the body. We're all the same thing. We're sparks of the divine. We're all God, and through consciousness, we are helping to create the universe. So you got to realize that the beings, wherever they are, and people want to say there's good ones and bad ones, but they're all beings, and they're all, I think, trying to do the best they can. And that when it comes down, you may be a gray, you may be a reptilian next time. And I always warn people, I say there's this idea that people will go after, like we live in Vancouver. So, one of the big ones who go after here is the Chinese, because they bought all the property, or the East Indians because there's massive numbers of East Indians here and stuff like that. And it's this sort of idea that the expression I use is, do you think Hillary Clinton was a bitch? Wait until you meet reincarnation's daughter, Karma. And this is the whole thing. What goes around comes around. What you sow, you reap. And it's this idea that if you are in this situation where you are putting down a race, a culture, a person, a religion, or whatever, you're almost setting yourself up for your next lifetime. That, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm going to be the refugee this time. I'm going to be on the other side of the fence. I'm going to be in one of the shithole nations and stuff like that. And you're going to take the position because that's the lesson you didn't learn. So people have to be very careful about who they criticize, because the next life, I mean, like we got like 125 million refugees running around the world with no place to go, no country to call home. And when those people die, we're going to have souls to take over for them. And all the people who are now putting them down, I think there's a good chance they're going to be playing that role next time around. And it's not that God or anybody's going to make them do it. They're going to agree that they want to grow, and that's what they have to do to grow. And they will make the decision themselves to go and do that.
Yeah, I like what you said, Grant. That's great. I could go on with part three here.
Yeah, yeah.
Part three is Federation contact and the Eisenhower rejection. This Federation made direct diplomatic overtures to the United States in 1954 when a group of white Nordic beings met with President Eisenhower and other officials. These ETs offered assistance in exchange for global renunciation of nuclear weapons, environmental responsibility, and spiritual realignment. According to multiple accounts, these proposals were rejected. The primary reason was refusal by U.S. leadership, in my view, under pressure from Rothschild globalist forces controlled by reptilian entities, to disarm or surrender technological and military dominance. So this rejection led to a shift. Plan A, open spiritual cooperation, was abandoned, and Plan B, a covert hybridization program, was implemented. Want to comment on that?
Okay, the contact probably did happen because if you listen to Jim Semivan, he does indicate there was a contact, but he will not say he will not comment on it. I guess it's classified. So you have the one from Holloman Air Force Base that has been confirmed
Yeah, I
by
think so.
Puthoff and guys like that. The presidents
Oh,
agreed.
good.
Bush and Ford agreed that yes, this had occurred. There had been
Wow.
contact. The one with Eisenhower, I don't think it was. Everybody says Grays, and then people say it's
Nordics?
Nordics types. The original, there was an actual memo that came out 2 weeks after it happened by a group in California, a UFO group in California, and they said it was etheric beings. So I always look at it like it was etheric beings that appeared, and the idea I think was the nuclear weapon thing. They wanted the nuclear weapons stopped, and I think the reason for the rejection was more like an American idea. Like America, you've got $1 trillion defense budget, and it's this idea that people have been, brainwashed or given this idea. We got these enemies now. It's like, Venezuela's an enemy, Greenland, Denmark, Colombia, Mexico, Canada, and the list goes on. And if you're a military guy, that's the way you think. Everything, you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And so Eisenhower's a five-star general. And so, of course, they come and say, you've got to take down your weapons. And of course, he's looking at the fact, well, I take down my weapons, I'm going to get bombed by the Soviet Union with their nuclear weapons. So he basically says, no, forget it. I'm not going to do it. What's important there is what I think they were trying to warn people was that if you take a look that a week later, after that meeting in February of 1954, you have March the 1st, which would actually been February 28th in California. There was the first test of the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb that could be carried in a plane. And it was tested in the Pacific, and it was, what was the name of it? I forgot the name of the test, but it was the first one of the test, and it was the one that went bad. They had taken deuterium-7. They thought it was neutral. It wasn't neutral, and so they had the bomb was supposed to be 5 megatons. It turned out it was almost 20 megatons. And there's all these stories described how the guys who detonated the bomb were 20 miles away. The island that they detonated on completely disappeared, and these guys were 20 miles away, and they were in the sort of a shelter. Also, the radiation detectors start going off, and the radiation is going through the roof, and they're going, "What's going on here?" And there's all this fallout coming, and they radio and they say, "Got to get us out of here." And they say, "Well, we can't get you out. We got to bring a helicopter in there." And these guys don't have any radiation suits, so they actually take bed sheets and put holes in there for eyes, and they got these bed sheets on, and they go running out to the helicopter, and they take off. And this is the one where the Japanese fishing trawler is, I don't know, it's 20 miles away or 30 miles away, and they all get radiated. The one guy dies right away, and all the others eventually die from radiation. And the Japanese actually have every year on March the 1st, they have a memorial to these people that died in this incident. The other thing that happened was that the wind was going in the wrong direction, and they contaminated an island with all these people on it. because they were not white people like us, like Americans, they basically decided there was a statement made. They said, "Let's leave them. Let's see how the savages will take radioactivity." So they didn't pull them off the island until 48 hours into this thing, and apparently 95% of people on the island got thyroid cancer, and they paid $1 billion in reparations. It was the biggest nuclear disaster in the history of the world. Most people don't know about it, but it happened because it happened in the
I
South
didn't know
Pacific.
you. Such a wealth of knowledge, Grant. I appreciate that. So
And,
they
and
should have
and
taken
that's
the
the whole thing. It
offer.
happened only a couple days after that Eisenhower meeting. So that's why I think they told him you got to stop this kind of stuff. He said get lost, and they knew this test was going to go bad. They knew what was going to happen in the South Pacific. And the other thing that's interesting about this encounter in '54 was there was other encounters, and you and I live in Canada, and Canada had one as well. If you listen to Paul Hellyer, he gave a speech in 1967 at St. Paul, Alberta. They had a centennial project where they built a UFO landing base outside of St. Paul, Alberta. And it was a tourist attraction and stuff. And people go to the landing base and stuff like that. And Paul Hellyer was opening the landing base, and he was Minister of Defense at the time. And he said, I just want to let you know this is not the first time that we've got a UFO landing base. We had one in Suffield, Alberta in 1954. That's the same year as Eisenhower. So the Canadians had made an arrangement for the aliens to land and make contact in Canada the same year as the Eisenhower contact that took place. And it was called off
Wow.
because Smith wanted to guarantee that Alpha, which is the name of the alien that was going to land in Suffield. And I kept asking Hellyer back in the '70s, me and another researcher were asking Hellyer back in the 1970s. We said, well, how do the aliens know where to land? I mean, you said there was a base, but how do they know? How do they know to go to Suffield? Because Suffield is just in the middle of nowhere. It's got a no-fly zone, but it's in the middle of Alberta. There's nothing around it. And Paul Hellyer said, well, there's this guy. He was U.S. Air Force, and he had given me the information. I said, well, what was his name? And he said, I don't remember his name. And then I put on my website, oh, come on, Hellyer, come on. You got to be making that up. How can you not remember the guy's name? He was the main guy, the UFO guy. And he said he wasn't really interested in UFOs. And when he made this speech, he said, I didn't write the speech in '67. I don't know anything about the base. I just read the speech. And so the Canadians did. And the other one was in Great Britain. There's this famous story about this alien that appears in Great Britain in 1954 and wants to meet with Prince Philip.
Yeah, I heard
And
that story.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the same year as well. So you have
Yeah.
it's almost like you have these contacts in the United States, Canada, and Great
Yeah.
Britain where aliens are coming down and wanting to meet with the head of the government. And the Canadian was called off because they wouldn't give a guarantee to allow Alpha to take off after the meeting was over. And Wilbur Smith said, that's it. According to his wife, that's what his wife told me. Wilbur Smith said, that's it. There's going to be no landing, and he called it off. So that's why they opened the base. And then Paul Hellyer said, well, nothing landed, therefore UFOs don't exist. Well, they don't tell the story. The real story of why it happened was it was called off because they wouldn't give a guarantee. That it was the military gave the guarantee, RCMP gave the guarantee they were allowed to take off, but the cabinet wouldn't give 100% guarantee they were allowed to take off. And the whole thing was called off by Wilbur because Wilbur was telling the government in Canada, he was saying, if you stop trying to shoot this thing down, I'll get it to land. That's why they made this arrangement in '54 for it to land at Suffield. And so there's been a few contacts around the world. There was one in '59 at the CIA, if you know that story, where the UFO flies by the window. They say, we want proof. What do you want? We want to see you. Go to the window. And they go to the window, all these CIA people, and the thing flies by over top of the White House, and it's during the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And that one, when the head of Blue Book tried to do an investigation, his ranking general told him another agency has it, leave it alone. So you can guarantee that in '54 they didn't just stop that one contact. They tried to make contact because this woman had taught this Navy intelligence guy how to do this channeling thing. So I'm sure they pursued that, and they pursued numerous times to try to make contact with these beings. There was the stories in the '50s they would flash lights at them, the airplane lights, landing lights. They would flash the lights at them to try to make contact with these beings. So because it would make sense. I mean, if you were in the government, you would try to do that. You got the capabilities, the money, you can set up the experiments and stuff like that. So that was the thing. What's the other thing? The alpha, the etheric. Um, yeah, that's basically the thing. So there was these contacts, and they were all basically sort of turned down. Wilbur Smith said every country in the world has been informed of the existence of the visitors from elsewhere, and it is up to them as to what they do with the information. So he was basically claiming that everybody knew what was going on, and of course the governments are all in fear. They're all into this thing, me versus you. So I've got to protect my country against you, the bad guys. And so everybody wants to keep it until they figure it out. And the bottom line that seems to be now that's being put out is they didn't figure out anything. They have no clue. They know the psychic elements of this thing, that this is true. But when it comes to the physical thing, they really haven't back engineered anything. So you're not gonna, if you're gonna put it on the table, if you got crash flying saucers and you put it on display, well, the Russians will say thank you very much. They're not gonna say anything. They're just gonna sit there and watch, and you're gonna help them out. So it's always this fear thing that we don't want to help the Russians and the Chinese. We want it for ourselves because we're under threat. Everybody's picking on us, and we're these poor people, and everybody's out to get us, and we play this victim, which is the same thing you get in the UFO field, where people want to play the victim. They want to, say the government's after them, and the aliens are after them, and all this kind of stuff, because it's much easier to play the victim. That's what the ego wants to do. The ego wants to be a victim, and then eventually people commit suicide, and the ego wins. And so it's always this battle between you and your ego. Your ego wants to make everything bad, and your higher self, the female brain, wants to say no. We should be one. We should be a family. We should be in contact and stuff. And it's always this battle between individuality and oneness. And that's why I say everything that you would consider, like if you talk about evil aliens, what I'd say that everything that you would consider to be evil in the modern world is created by one thing and one thing only: the mistaken belief in separation. That's all it is if you suddenly believe that you understand like you're like a cell in a body, you're like an ant in an ant colony, you're like a bee in a beehive, and you have a job to do, and everybody works together, everything works fine. The bees don't have any problem and stuff like that. And but everybody sees it. And if you take a look back at the original FBI investigations, when they went after Adamski and stuff, they went after him not because he was seeing UFOs, because he had this message of oneness, and everybody works together. And they said, is he a communist spy? Did the Russians put him into the United States? And he was that. Those guys are all being investigated as communists because they were putting out this communist message of everybody's equal, everybody's a cell in the body, everybody work together, and let's not fight with each other.
I think a telepathic society is a good thing. That's what we need. That's where we should be going. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But everybody wants to be the American dream. Everybody wants to be the billionaire with the big yacht.
The individualist. Yeah.
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 Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah. So next part is part 4 is Plan B, the hybridization program.